The left has a war on the whole idea of gender. It's a war on men, but it's also a war on women. And look no further than their campaign to get biological men into women's sports. I mean, this is insane. We couldn't even have imagined this conversation 3 or 4 years ago. But the idea that it is now like an article of faith with them that a biological man must be able to play in women's sports and use the locker room with the girls is insane.
You've been leading on the tech stuff sort of outside of this, but this is obviously very connected to the tech side of it. I mean, I'll watch my niece flip through TikTok and, you just suddenly out of nowhere, literally, she's suddenly, it's My Little Pony and then it's some weird gender thing and then 5 more videos and something else. What do we do about that? And, I know you've been one of the guys trying to figure out, okay, do we break them up? When are we supposed to use government power here?
Well, I just say again, as a dad, I want to raise my kids. My wife and I, we want to raise our kids. I don't want big tech raising them for me. I don't want some algorithm raising them for me, period. So I'm against tech being able to track our kids all over the internet, collect all their personal information, build dossiers on them. I think we should just prohibit that, just straight up. Like, you cannot target children under a certain age. You cannot build dossiers on them. And I think we ought to give every parent in America the right to get their kids' information back from all these social media platforms. You ought to be able, as a father, to go on and say, okay, my 10-year-old kid, now my kids are not on social media, but I know the day is coming. I'm trying to delay it. But as a parent, I want the right to go on and say, I want from Facebook everything you've collected on my kid. I want it all back. You delete it, give it to me, delete it. Every parent ought to have that basic right. You mentioned breaking them up. I am a big competition guy. So my view is that Facebook, Google, they're monopolies. I mean, they really are. They've tried to kill competition all the time. We ought to break them up and let there be more competition. We ought to allow others to get in there to compete and to have real privacy protections. But bottom line is, we got to give power to parents. Got to give them power to protect their kids, to get their kids' information. Don't allow big tech to raise kids.
Yeah. Did you focus at all on the female side of this? I know that obviously the book is about young males. There's a whole other set of issues happening with young females. Many of them seem to be transitioning more than males, although it's happening both directions. But I assume you think some of the issues are somewhat constant.
Oh, absolutely, and particularly with tech. I mean, listen, I think the left has a war on the whole idea of gender. It's a war on men, but it's also a war on women. And look no further than their campaign to get biological men into women's sports. I mean, this is insane. We couldn't even have imagined this conversation 3 or 4 years ago. But the idea that it is now like an article of faith with them that a biological man must be able to play in women's sports and use the locker room with the girls is insane. So yeah, I think what you're seeing from the left, again from the Marxist left really, is a campaign against gender. It's against womanhood. It's against manhood. There are a lot of similarities there in how they're trying to destroy these things that are permanent, these things that are constant. And we've got to stand up for them. So conservatives got to stand up and say, no, you know what? You don't get to be a woman by just wanting to be a woman. There is such a thing as biological womanhood, and it's awesome and should be protected. And girls playing sports should be protected. And men on your side of the aisle, your side of the equation, we need you to be good, strong men, and we need you to stand up and be providers and be responsible. So we got to do both. And I think the left is really attacking both men and women. And you can see it. You can see it in the huge number of kids now who are totally confused about their gender and say that they want to transition. They don't even know what that means. And it's being promoted by leftist ideology and the alliance with big tech.
Yeah, one of Jordan Peterson's lines on this is, even if you were to take the kid who is the 0.0001% that has gender dysmorphia, it doesn't mean after all the hormones and surgeries that they're going to be happier. They most likely won't be, actually. And that's in the case of when it genuinely is real, which obviously there's a social contagion element to this.
Yeah, totally. And if you look at those numbers, it's really striking. If you look at the breakdown in gender dysphoria in those cases clinically diagnosed from, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, versus today, it is impossible to argue, I think, that this isn't a social contagion. You look at it those years ago and the huge explosion, huge win, right around the time the smartphone and social media really take off and that every teenager in America has one, boom. Right then, we see huge numbers, and the gender dysphoria issue is concentrated largely in young girls, in teenage and preteen girls. And we've seen just off the charts numbers there. And for the left to say stuff like, oh, we have to be for this. We've got to promote gender transition, gender surgery, hormone treatment. I mean, I think this is crazy when parents don't know. If the parents haven't consented, looking at what is really driving this, the social contagion. Again, the left is so out of touch with reality and is so contrary to what parents want.
Are you guys in Missouri doing anything like what we've done here in Florida with the Parental Rights in Education bill? Are they allowed to do this in schools without you knowing as the parent?
You know, the Missouri legislature, I think, has done some really good work, both on parental rights when it comes to schools, and then also just on this gender treatment issue, saying that, listen, you know, parents, you can't push this gender trans ideology on kids behind parents' back. You can't do this without parental consent. You can't do this without getting the minors' full consent. So just in this last legislative session, I think our legislators have done some really important stuff. And it's going to take, you mentioned the states, it's going to take the states stepping up here and creating walls around the family and saying, we're going to protect parents and we're going to protect kids and we're going to empower parents. Because if we don't do that at the state level, the bureaucrats will just run roughshod over families, over kids, and they will push their ideology until they get what they want.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I can't really get Democrats to come on this show anymore, and I'm not noted as the hardest interviewer, and I would treat them with respect, but they simply don't want to do it. But when you talk, or I'm guessing they don't talk to you that often probably either, but if you're in the Senate, you're wandering around the building, the offices over there, and you happen to see somebody, Chuck Schumer, somebody that, I'm not talking one of the real radicals, like someone that 20 years ago might have been thought of as somewhat sane. Do they buy this? Didn't they all just vote against a bill that was going to protect girls in sports? Every single Democrat?
Yeah, they did over on the House side, and I'm sure they'd vote against it in the Senate. Yeah, I don't know what their real beliefs are, and I won't pretend to speak for them, but I just think that the radical left, the Marxist left, has so captured the Democrat Party that they live in fear. I think they just live in, that's why they won't say the word woman. You know, they say people with birthing capacity. They can't even, and when I say they, I mean senators. Democrat senators won't say woman anymore. I mean, it is insane. And I think it is fear of the radical left who are so powerful now in their party.
Yeah. Where do you think education comes into this in terms of what a man should do with his life? You know, we sort of had this idea that everybody had to go to the four-year school. We now know that they were basically brainwashing everybody, but that there are a lot of other jobs and things that you can do in your life that are valuable without following that path.
Oh, yeah, I believe that 100%. Listen, 70+% of American men do not have a four-year college degree. They shouldn't have to get one in order to get a good paying job in this country and be able to provide for a family. That's my bottom line. So I'm not for this shove kids and shove young men in particular towards four-year degrees, make them take on tremendous amounts of debt, allow them to be brainwashed by the university establishment, who are some of the worst actors in America. You talk about what they've done to this country while taking our money, by the way. I mean, just gobbling up taxpayer money and yet indoctrinating our kids. So no, I'm not for forcing people to go down that route. I think that men ought to be able to learn a trade. They want to do that, get an associate's degree, not go to college, and they ought to be able to get a good paying job. And I just come back to the fact that our policymakers have sent almost 4 million blue-collar jobs to China in the last 20 years. Those jobs are jobs that used to be able to support a family, overwhelmingly held by men. We need good blue-collar work in this country. And if we don't get it, we're not going to have a country.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of mindless drivel, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.